My name is Carol Peterson, I'm 68 years old. And my own son tried to have me declared senile so he could sell my home and put me in a state-run facility. Before I tell you how a secret my late husband left behind turned the tables and cost them their entire inheritance, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The air in Mr. Henderson's law office was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. It smelled of old books and lemon polish, a scent I'd always found comforting. But not today. Today it smelled like betrayal. Across the vast mahogany desk, my son Robert sat stiffly in his chair, refusing to meet my eyes. He just kept staring at a spot on the wall, his jaw tight. Next to him, his wife Brenda was the picture of smug confidence. She crossed her legs, the expensive leather of her new handbag squeaking in the silence. She was the one who spoke first, her voice dripping with the kind of false sympathy that makes your skin crawl. "Come on, Carol," she said, and the way she used my first name instead of Mom felt like a deliberate little jab. "Let's not make this any more difficult than it needs to be. We have the paperwork right here. It's all perfectly legal." She gestured to a neat stack of documents their own lawyer had placed at the center of the desk. The power of attorney. The papers I had signed. "Everything is in Robbie's name now," Brenda continued, a triumphant little smile playing on her lips. "The house, the savings, the bakery, all of it. We'll be putting the house on the market next week." Robert finally stirred, clearing his throat. "It's for your own good, Mom," he mumbled, still looking at the wall. "You haven't been yourself lately. Forgetting things. We were worried. The doctors at the Oakwood Meadows facility are excellent. They'll take good care of you." Oakwood Meadows. I knew the place. It was where people went when their families had given up on them. It was clean, sterile, and utterly soulless. The thought of spending my last years there, staring out a window, made my blood run cold. They weren't doing this because they were worried. They were doing this because they were greedy. I didn't say a word. I just looked from my son's averted face to my daughter-in-law's predatory smile. 4 years I had poured my life into that boy. After his father, Frank, passed away, I made sure he never wanted for anything. I funded his education, helped with the down payment on their house, and gave them both cushy, overpaid jobs at the bakery I had built from scratch with my own 2 hands. And this was how they repaid me. A one-way ticket to a nursing home so they could cash in their inheritance early. Brenda sighed dramatically, as if my silence was a great inconvenience. "Look, if it's about the money, we've already set up a small trust for your personal expenses at the home. It's very generous." "Generous," I repeated, my voice quiet but steady. It was the first word I'd spoken since we sat down. Robert flinched at the sound of my voice. Brenda, however, just plowed ahead. "Yes. Now, Mr. Henderson, I believe we're just here to finalize the transfer of the business assets. As you can see with Carol's signature on the POA, Robert has full authority to." She trailed off as I reached down and lifted a heavy, worn leather briefcase onto the polished desk. It was Frank's old briefcase, the one he'd carried to work every day for 30 years. The brass latches were tarnished, and the leather was cracked with age, but it was solid. It landed on the desk with a heavy, definitive thud that echoed in the quiet room. Both of their heads snapped towards it. "What's that?" Brenda asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. I didn't answer her. My movements were slow, deliberate. I wasn't the frail, confused old woman they thought I was. Not anymore. I carefully undid the 2 latches. They clicked open with a sound that seemed to slice through the tension. I opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single, thick folder. I lifted it out and placed it on the desk beside their neat, modern stack of legal papers. My folder was old, the manila cardboard soft and yellowed at the edges. Robert was finally looking at me now, his eyes wide with a confusion that was quickly turning to fear. He knew that briefcase. He knew what it represented. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I looked him straight in the eye, letting him see the cold resolve I'd been hiding for weeks. Then I turned my gaze to Brenda, whose perfectly painted smile had finally vanished, replaced by a hard, narrow-eyed glare. "I believe," I said, my voice as clear as a bell, "that you are mistaken." I placed my hand on the old folder. They stared at it, then at me, the air crackling with unspoken questions. Their perfect, foolproof plan was about to come crashing down. They had no idea this was just the beginning. To truly understand the chill in that room, the sheer depth of the betrayal that sat across from me, you have to go back. You have to understand the world as it was before the rot set in, before the smiles became masks and the words of love became weapons. You have to understand the bakery. The sweet life wasn't just a business to me. It was a living, breathing testament to a 50-year love story. My Frank and I, we were just kids when we started it, with nothing but a second-hand oven and a dream. I remember our hands always dusted with flour, touching as we reached for the same sugar sack. I remember the exhaustion in our bones after 16-hour days. An exhaustion that felt like victory because we were building something together. That bakery was where we celebrated our triumphs and weathered our storms. Its warm, yeasty smell was the scent of my life, my marriage. Every dollar we made, every drop of sweat, was poured into our son, Robbie. He was our miracle. We made sure his world was safe and easy in ways ours never had been. We built a college fund for him before he could even read, ensuring he'd graduate without the anchor of debt that had weighed us down. When he wanted to marry Brenda, a woman I admit I never fully warmed to but accepted for his sake, we helped them with a generous down payment on a beautiful house in a neighborhood we could only have dreamed of at their age. And when he needed a job, I didn't just give him one. I created a position for him, business manager, with a salary that was far more than the job required. I wanted him to feel important. I wanted him to be secure. My love for him was a vast, unconditional thing. I saw him not as the man he was, but as the little boy whose face would light up whenever I'd let him lick the frosting from the bowl. After Frank's funeral, that love became my entire world. The bakery was my anchor, but Robbie was my reason. He and Brenda were magnificent in those first few months. They'd bring over casseroles I didn't have the heart to eat, and Robbie would mow the lawn, his presence a comforting echo of his father's. "You're not alone, Mom," he'd say, wrapping me in a hug that felt so much like Frank's it made my heart ache. "We're right here. We'll take care of you." I believed him. Oh, how I wanted to believe him. The change when it came was like a shift in the wind. A slight chill you feel on your skin before you understand why. It began with the little cruelties, the kind you can easily explain away. My mother's porcelain teapot, a delicate thing with tiny hand-painted roses, had survived 2 world wars and 3 generations of clumsy hands. One Sunday, Brenda was helping me clear the table. I heard the crash from the kitchen. I rushed in to see it shattered on the floor. "Oh my goodness, Carol, I am so clumsy. I'm terribly sorry," she cried, her hands flying to her mouth in a perfect pantomime of distress. But there were no tears in her eyes. There was just a flicker of something. Annoyance? Satisfaction? I knelt on the cold linoleum, my fingers trembling as I picked up the sharp, flowered shards of my history. "It was an accident, dear," I heard myself say, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My heart knew better. It felt like a message, a small act of destruction to let me know that the things I held precious were no longer safe. Soon after, the whispers about the bakery began. They were couched in concern, of course. "You look tired, Mom," Robbie said one evening, watching me knead dough for the morning rush. "You've done enough. Don't you think it's time to sell? You could travel. See the world. Dad would have wanted that for you." The suggestion was a physical blow. "Sell the bakery? Robbie, this is your father's legacy. This is our home." I know," he said, patting my hand dismissively. "But it's also a valuable piece of real estate. Brenda was looking at the property values in this area, and they're through the roof. It's a gold mine, Mom. You're sitting on a fortune." He said it so casually as if he were talking about the weather. He wasn't seeing the memories baked into the walls, the 50 years of love and labor. He was seeing dollar signs. He was seeing his inheritance. And I saw with a clarity that terrified me, that he wasn't just my son anymore. He was Brenda's husband, and her voice, her ambition was coming out of his mouth. I pushed the thought away, told myself I was being uncharitable, that I was just a grieving widow seeing shadows where there were none. I chose to see my little boy, not the stranger standing in front of me. That was my first great mistake. The campaign of concern intensified over the next few months, a slow, methodical siege on my independence. Brenda was the general, and my son was her loyal soldier. Her help became a constant, suffocating presence in my home. She would show up unannounced, a key I now realized Robbie must have given her. and begin her work. It was a campaign of psychological warfare, fought with Tupperware and misplaced photo albums. She reorganized my kitchen cupboards, putting the spices in alphabetical order, and the plates on a shelf I couldn't reach without a steps tool. "There, isn't that better?" she'd announce, beaming. "So much more efficient." To an outsider, it looked like a daughter-in-law's kindness. To me, it felt like a deliberate act of disorientation, designed to make me feel helpless in my own home. She began to manage my social life. My friends would call and Brenda would answer my phone. "Oh, hi Mary," I heard her say one afternoon, her voice laced with pity. "She's just resting now. Her memory's been a bit spotty lately. We don't want to overwhelm her." She was isolating me, cutting my lines of support, painting me as a fragile invalid to the outside world. The gaslighting was constant and insidious. One day, I walked into the kitchen to find a burner on the electric stove glowing red. I hadn't used it all day. "Oh my God, Mom," Robbie cried, rushing to turn it off. "You left the stove on again. This is what we're worried about. You could burn the whole house down." I stood there speechless. I knew I hadn't done it. I knew it was them, creating the evidence they needed to prove their narrative. But how could I say that? How could I accuse my own son of something so monstrous? The very idea felt insane. They were making me doubt my own sanity. Then came the Tuesday morning they sprang the trap. They arrived with a box of my favorite maple scones, a peace offering for a war I didn't even know I was losing. They were all smiles and sunshine. They sat me down at my kitchen table, the very table where I had helped Robbie with his homework and listened to his dreams. "Mom," Robbie began, his voice practiced and smooth. He couldn't quite meet my eye. He opened a thick file folder and spread a sheaf of papers in front of me. "Brenda and I were talking to a financial advisor. He said that at your age, it's really important to get your affairs in order. This is just paperwork. To protect you." Brenda leaned in, her perfume cloying and sweet. "It's called a medical power of attorney, Carol," she explained, as if to a child. "It's a simple document. All it does is give Robbie the ability to speak to your doctors if you're ever in the hospital and can't speak for yourself. God forbid, you know? Like if you had a stroke. It's just a safeguard. Every responsible senior has one." It all sounded so logical, so caring. They had an answer for everything. They had weaponized my love for my son and were using it against me. My mind was screaming, a high-pitched wail of alarm that sounded just like Frank. "Read the fine print, Carol. Never sign what you haven't read." But I was tired. I was tired of the tension, of the feeling of being managed in my own home. And a part of me, a foolish, hopeful part, thought that maybe if I just did this one thing, if I just showed them I trusted them, things would go back to the way they were. That the loving son I remembered would come back. "I don't have my reading glasses," I murmured, a last, weak protest. "Oh, don't you worry," Brenda said, her voice like silk. "I'll show you exactly where to sign. It's just your name right here and here. And one last one on the back." Her manicured finger pointed to the lines. Robbie pushed a pen into my hand. I looked at his face, searching for a sign, a flicker of doubt, anything to show me my little boy was still in there. But his expression was blank, his eyes focused on the papers. He was a stranger to me. My hand trembled as I signed my name. Carol Peterson. A signature that had built a business, signed a marriage license, and co-signed a car loan for the very man sitting across from me. With each stroke of the pen, I felt like I was signing my own death warrant. When I finished the last one, I looked up, and I saw it. Brenda's eyes met Robbie's over my head. It wasn't just triumph. It was the cold, satisfied gleam of a business deal closed, a successful hostile takeover. The warmth in the room vanished. The scones on the plate suddenly looked like poison. In that split second, I knew I hadn't just made a mistake. I had handed my enemies the keys to my life. The house was silent after they left, but my mind was screaming. The image of that triumphant look between them was burned onto the back of my eyelids. It was the look of checkmate. For 2 days I existed in a fog of fear and denial. I'd wander through my house, touching the furniture, looking at photos of Frank and a younger, happier Robbie, and a wave of nausea would wash over me. What had I done? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had misinterpreted the look. Maybe they really were just trying to help and I was being a paranoid old woman. But the cold dread in my gut, The part of me that had learned to trust my instincts over a lifetime of experience told me I was in terrible danger. On the third morning after another sleepless night, I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I knew by heart. Susan. My rock. My friend of 40 years. Susie, it's Carol, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I think I'm in trouble. I didn't even have to explain. She heard the panic in my voice. I'm putting the kettle on. Get over here. Now. Sitting at her familiar kitchen table, with a mug of hot sweet tea clutched in my shaking hands, I poured out the whole sordid story. I told her about the little cruelties, the gaslighting, the constant pressure, and finally the signing of the papers. She listened, her face a thundercloud of growing anger. She didn't interrupt once. She just let me talk until the whole ugly story was laid out between us. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Her fingers steepled under her chin. Okay, she said, her voice low and serious. First things first. We need to see that document. You said you didn't get a copy. No, I said, shame washing over me. I was so flustered I didn't even think to ask. Of course you didn't. That was the point, she said, her voice sharp as steel. They counted on you being flustered. All right, new plan. You're going to call Robbie. You're going to sound a little confused, play right into their hands. You're going to tell him that your accountant, what's his name, Bill, called and needs a copy of any new legal documents for your tax portfolio. Say Bill was very insistent. Can you do that? Felt like the hardest performance of my life, but I nodded. I went into her living room to make the call, so she couldn't hear my voice tremble. I dialed Robbie. Hi, honey. I started, trying to sound vague and a little frail. That nice man, Bill, my accountant? He called this morning, something about taxes. He said he needs a copy of those papers you had me sign. The medical ones? There was a long pause. I could hear Brenda's muffled voice in the background, sharp and suspicious. My heart hammered. This was it. If he said no, I was lost. Why does he need that, Mom? Robbie finally asked, his tone wary. Oh, I don't know, dear. Something about estate planning? He used a lot of big words. He just said it was very important. I added a little quaver to my voice. I don't want to get in trouble with the government, Robbie. Another long pause. More whispering. Fine, he said. His voice clipped with annoyance. I'll make a photocopy and drop it in your mailbox on my way to work. But Mom, you need to stop worrying about these things. That's why we did this, remember? So we can handle it for you. The condescension in his voice was like a slap, but I just murmured my thanks and hung up. An hour later, I saw his car pull up. He didn't even get out. He just leaned over and shoved a manila envelope into my mailbox before speeding away. The coward couldn't even face me. I didn't open it. I drove it straight back to Susan's, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. We spread the pages out on her table. This time I had my reading glasses on. Susan read with a grim professional efficiency. I watched her eyes scan the dense paragraphs. I saw her jaw tighten. I saw her knuckles turn white as she gripped the edge of the page. Finally, she looked up at me, and any hope I had left died in her eyes. Oh, Carol, she breathed, her voice filled with fury. That son of a bitch. She took a deep breath. Honey, this isn't a medical power of attorney. This is a general durable power of attorney. It's the nuclear option. She explained it to me, piece by devastating piece. She showed me the clause that gave Robbie immediate control of all my finances, my bank accounts, my investments. She showed me the clause that gave him the right to sell my property, including my home and the bakery. And then she showed me the worst part, the part that made the air leave my lungs. It gave him the right to make all my personal and living arrangements, including the right to place me in a long-term care facility. It's ironclad, Carol, she said, her voice soft but unwavering. They lied to you. This document is designed to strip you of everything. They can take your money, sell your home, and lock you away, and legally you've given them permission to do it. She took my hand. They're not trying to protect you. They're trying to erase you. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The words erase you echoed in the silent kitchen. A death sentence delivered by my best friend. My life, my 50 years of hard work, my home filled with memories, my future. All of it could be taken away because of a few strokes of a pen. The room felt like it was closing in, the walls tilting. I felt a wave of despair so profound I thought it might swallow me whole. Then Susan's hand tightened on mine, a firm grounding pressure. "No," she said, her voice fierce. "We are not going to let that happen. You hear me, Carol? You are not the frail old woman they think you are. You are a fighter. Frank was a fighter and so are you. Now we fight back." Her strength was a lifeline. It pulled me from the depths of my despair and replaced it with a flicker of something else. Anger. A cold, clean, clarifying anger. They had mistaken my love for weakness, my trust for stupidity. They were about to find out how wrong they were. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice still shaky but no longer hopeless. "We get a better lawyer," she said immediately. "And I know just the one." That's how we ended up in Mr. Henderson's office the next morning. He was a man in his 70s, with kind eyes and a mind as sharp as a tack. He had been Frank's lawyer and friend for 40 years. When I showed him the document, his kind face hardened. He read it in silence, his expression growing grimmer with each page. "This is predatory, Carol," he said finally, his voice rumbling with controlled anger. "It's a textbook case of elder abuse and financial fraud. But proving fraudulent inducement is incredibly difficult. It becomes a he said, she said situation. And I'm sorry to say it, but the courts often look at documents like this, signed by a senior, and assume the best intentions from the children." My newfound hope began to crumble. "So it's hopeless?" "I never say hopeless," he said, holding up a hand. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Carol, think back. Frank was the most meticulous man I ever knew. He planned for everything. He loved you fiercely, but he was also pragmatic. He worried about the future. Did he ever leave you with anything? Any special instructions, any odd requests, a safe deposit box key?" And that's when the memory, hazy from grief and time, floated to the surface. Frank in his final days, his hand clutching mine. His voice a weak whisper against the hospital pillows. "Carol, remember the briefcase. No matter what, don't ever get rid of the briefcase. It's all in there. Everything to protect you." I had thought it was just rambling, his mind wandering. But now, "The briefcase," I whispered. The words felt foreign on my tongue. "His old leather briefcase from the office. He told me never to get rid of it. It's in the closet." A spark ignited in Mr. Henderson's eyes. "Carol," he said, his voice urgent. "Go home. Get that briefcase. Do not let anyone see you. Do not open it. Bring it directly back here." The drive home was a blur. My hand shook as I unlocked the door to my bedroom closet. There in the back, behind a row of Frank's old suits that still smelled faintly of him, was the briefcase. It was heavy, solid, a relic from another time. I carried it to my car like it was a sacred object. Back in Mr. Henderson's office, he placed it on his desk with a quiet reverence. He didn't try the latches. Instead, he ran his hand along the bottom, pressing gently in different spots. I heard a soft click, and a section of the bottom panel loosened. A false bottom. My brilliant, cautious Frank. Mr. Henderson reached inside and pulled out a slim, pristine file folder. It was sealed with a wax stamp bearing his law firm's crest. He broke the seal and slid out a stack of documents. They were the original, notarized incorporation bylaws for the Sweet Life Bakery, LLC. He spent 10 minutes reading, a slow smile spreading across his face. He chuckled, a low rumbling sound. "Oh, Frank, you magnificent bastard," he murmured, shaking his head in admiration. He turned the documents around to face me. "Carol, your husband was a genius. He saw this coming. Maybe not from Robbie, but from someone. He built a fortress to protect you, and the deed is right here." He pointed to a densely worded section. "Article 4, Section B. The Founders Clause," he announced. I wrote it myself at his insistence. It states that as co-founders, all major decisions regarding the company's primary assets, and he specifically defines those assets as the bakery and this house, require the unanimous, written consent of both of you. But here's the beautiful part. He tapped another sentence. "Upon the death of one founder, the surviving founder assumes sole, permanent and irrevocable veto power over any and all such decisions." Irrevocable, Carol. That means no document signed under duress, no power of attorney, no court order can force you to sell. They can rattle the gates all they want, but you and you alone hold the key to the fortress. Frank made sure of it. Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of sorrow or fear. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude and love for the man who was still taking care of me, even from beyond the grave. The knowledge of Frank's fortress changed everything. The fear that had been my constant companion was replaced by a cold, hard certainty. But Mr. Henderson and Susan were adamant about the next step. "You can't let them know you know," Mr. Henderson warned, his expression serious. "They believe they hold all the cards. We need them to overplay their hand. We need them to walk into that final meeting so full of arrogance and greed that they expose themselves completely." So began the most difficult performance of my life. I had to become the woman they believed me to be. I had to play the part of a confused, deteriorating old woman, and I had to make it convincing. I embraced the role with an actress's dedication. I started leaving my grocery list at home. I would call Robbie and ask him the same question twice in 5 minutes. "Honey, what time did you say you were coming over on Sunday?" "Oh, that's right, you already told me." Silly me. Each feigned lapse was a twist of the knife in my own heart, but I saw how it fueled their confidence. Their voices on the phone would take on that gentle, condescending tone one uses for a child. "It's okay, Mom. Don't worry about it." Brenda's visits became even more insufferable. She treated my home like it was already hers. One Saturday she brought over a stack of paint swatches. "I was just thinking, Carol," she said, holding up 2 shades of beige against my living room wall. "This whole room would feel so much bigger with a lighter color, don't you think? Something more modern." I just smiled my vacant smile and said, "That's nice, dear." While inside, I was imagining throwing the entire can of paint on her expensive white coat. The cruelty became more overt. I knew they had access to my bank accounts, and I watched online as small, then larger sums of money began to disappear. A $200 charge at a fancy restaurant. A $500 charge at a designer boutique. They were testing the waters, and when I didn't say anything, playing the part of someone too befuddled to notice, they got bolder. One afternoon, Brenda sat me down at my own computer, clucking her tongue. "Carol, you've missed a credit card payment," she said, her voice full of feigned concern. "You can't let these things slide. Here, let me just set up autopay for you from your main account. You won't have to worry your pretty little head about it anymore." She made me watch as she navigated my accounts, treating me like a toddler who couldn't be trusted with sharp objects. The humiliation burned, but I just nodded and thanked her for being so thoughtful. Every condescending word, every stolen dollar was another nail in their coffin. But the act that pushed me past the point of no return, the one that extinguished the last flickering ember of maternal feeling in my heart, was the matter of the medal. Frank's purple heart. A sacred object in our home. After I discovered it was missing, a cold rage, different from anything I had ever felt, settled over me. I knew I had to play my part, but I also had to know for sure. I waited until Brenda was over one afternoon. I feigned a moment of clarity. "Brenda, dear," I said, looking her right in the eye. "I've been thinking about that medal. Your father's purple heart. I think I know what happened to it." She froze, her hand halfway to her teacup. "Oh," she said, her voice wary. "Yes," I said, forcing a sad, confused smile. I think I might have donated it to the Goodwill box. You know how I get sometimes clearing things out. I must have just swept it into a bag by mistake." I watched her face, and I saw it. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over her features. Her shoulders relaxed. She had been worried I suspected her. My lie had given her the perfect out. "Oh, Carol, you silly thing," she said, laughing a little too loudly. "See? I told you it would turn up." "Well, not really, but at least now we know. You really have to be more careful." She thought she was calming a confused old woman, but what she was really doing was confirming her guilt. She had taken it. She had stolen my husband's honor, and my lie had just proven it to me beyond any doubt. That night I sat in the dark, clutching Frank's old briefcase. There was no more pain, no more sadness. There was only the quiet, patient waiting of a hunter in a blind, listening for the approach of its prey, knowing the trap was set and the outcome was certain. And so we returned to that moment. The 4 of us in that suffocatingly quiet room. the air thick with unspoken greed and simmering rage. My son a stranger. My daughter-in-law a vulture. And me the old woman they thought they had already defeated. The sight of Frank's briefcase on the table had thrown them off balance. My calm defiance was not part of their script. They had expected tears, pleading, the confused ramblings of a woman beaten. They did not expect this quiet, steady opposition. Robbie found his voice first, a nervous tremor in it. Mom, seriously, what is this? Some kind of joke? Mr. Henderson, can we please just get on with this? We have the power of attorney. It's a legally executed document. It's done. Is it, Robert? I asked, my voice even. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a fleeting second I saw the little boy I used to know scared and out of his depth. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a sullen defensiveness. Brenda, ever the aggressor, leaned forward, her eyes narrowed into slits. Enough of the theatrics, Carol. What's in the folder? Your secret cookie recipe? Some old photos? It doesn't matter. No document you have can invalidate the one you signed last month. Perhaps you should let Mr. Henderson be the judge of that, I said, sliding the old, soft folder across the desk. It landed in front of him with a quiet sigh. Mr. Henderson took his time. He put on his reading glasses, adjusted them on his nose, and opened the folder with a deliberate slowness that made Brenda tap her lacquered nails impatiently on the table. He addressed not me, not them, but their lawyer, a young man who looked increasingly like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Counselor, Mr. Henderson began, his voice the epitome of calm professionalism. Your clients have presented you with a durable power of attorney, signed by my client. It appears to be in order. However, a superseding document often takes precedence, especially one that establishes the foundational governance of a long-standing legal entity. Their lawyer blinked. A superseding document? Indeed, Mr. Henderson said. What I have here are the original, notarized incorporation bylaws of the Sweet Life Bakery, Limited Liability Corporation. This document, which established the legal and financial framework of the business, predates your power of attorney by more than 20 years. Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh. The bakery bylaws? Are you serious? That's what this is all about. We're not just talking about the bakery, we're talking about everything. Her house, her accounts. But that's where you are mistaken, Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Henderson interrupted smoothly. You see, Frank Peterson was an exceptionally thorough man. I would draw your attention to Article 4, Section B. It is entitled the Founder's Clause. He turned the ancient document around and pushed it towards the center of the table. Their lawyer, Robbie, and Brenda all leaned forward to read the spidery typewritten text. I knew the words by heart. I watched their eyes move across the page, and I watched the dawning comprehension, followed by sheer, unadulterated panic. Brenda was the first to look up, her face ashen. The blood had drained from it, leaving her makeup standing out in stark, clownish relief. What the hell is this? She stammered. It's called foresight, my dear, I said, finding my own voice. Mr. Henderson continued the explanation, his tone leaving no room for argument. The Founder's Clause explicitly states that any and all major decisions regarding the disposition of the company's primary assets, which, as you can see, are clearly defined in the addendum as the commercial property at 45 Main Street and the residential property at 123 Elm Street, which was purchased with company profits, require the unanimous written and notarized consent of both founding partners, Frank Peterson and Carol Peterson. He paused, letting the weight of the words fill the room. Furthermore, the clause contains a survivorship provision. In the event of the death of one founder, the surviving founder, that would be Mrs. Peterson, assumes sole, absolute, permanent, and irrevocable veto power over any and all such transactions. Irrevocable. He repeated the word, savoring it. That means no power of attorney, no conservator, no heir can ever force the sale or transfer of those assets. Your document allows you to pay her electric bill, Robert. But this document, your father's final gift to your mother, prevents you from selling her home out from under her. You are, as they say, completely and utterly checkmated. Brenda just stared, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. That can't be legal. Oh, it's impeccably legal, Mr. Henderson said with a grim smile. I should know. I wrote it myself. The revelation of the founder's clause sucked the air out of the room. The smug certainty that had radiated from Brenda was gone, replaced by a frantic, cornered energy. Their lawyer was pale, shuffling his own papers as if hoping to find a magical rebuttal that he knew didn't exist. Robbie just stared at the old document on the table, as if it were a venomous snake. But the other assets, Brenda finally managed to say, her voice tight and strained. The savings accounts. The investments. The POA still gives us control over those. This old piece of paper doesn't protect that. She looked at me, a new kind of venom in her eyes. You'll still be living comfortably at Oakwood Meadows, Carol. We'll just be funding it with your stock portfolio instead of the house. She was grasping at straws, trying to salvage some piece of her victory from the wreckage. She was still trying to erase me, just with a different financial instrument. Robbie looked up, a flicker of pathetic hope in his eyes. She's right, Mom. Though you still signed it. You still gave us control of your personal finances. Did I give you control, Robbie? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Or did you and your wife conspire to defraud me? Did you lie to my face, telling me a document was for my medical protection when you knew it was designed to make me homeless and penniless? Brenda slammed her hand on the table. That is a vile, slanderous accusation. You have no proof. You were confused. We explained it to you and you agreed. It's your failing memory against our word. Ah, my memory, I said with a slow, sad shake of my head. It's been such a problem lately, hasn't it? That's what you've been telling everyone. My friends, my neighbors, you've been so very concerned. I reached into my large handbag, the one I'd started carrying everywhere, and pulled out the small, silver digital voice recorder. I placed it on the desk. It looked like a harmless little gadget. You know, I continued conversationally. One of the problems with being so forgetful is that you can't always trust you remember conversations correctly. So, a few weeks ago I decided to get a little help. This little device has been wonderful. It helps me keep track of things. Their lawyer went rigid. Mrs. Peterson, are you implying you've been making recordings? Implying? I asked. Oh no, dear. I'm stating it as a fact. Recording a private conversation without consent is a felony in some states. Brenda shrieked, her voice rising in panic. A common misconception, Mr. Henderson interjected, his voice a bomb of calm authority. We are currently in Ohio, a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation, in this case my client, is aware of and consents to the recording, it is perfectly legal. And it becomes particularly powerful evidence when used to prove a crime, such as conspiracy to commit fraud against the elderly. He let the last words hang in the air. I watched the color drain from Robbie's face. He looked like he was going to be sick. I pressed the small play button. The first recording was from my kitchen. Brenda's voice, sharp and clear, talking on her cell phone while she thought I was upstairs napping. I'm telling you, Ashley, it was perfect. He was hesitant, but I just reminded him about the new Tesla he wants. The old lady didn't even read it. Signed it with a smile on her face. We just have to lay low for a few more weeks, let her decline a little more in public, and then we can list the house. The lawyer said it's ironclad. I pressed stop. Then I played the second one. This one was from their car. Robbie's whining voice and Brenda's sharp, impatient reply. My phone had been accidentally left on the back seat. Robbie. I just feel. I don't know, Bren, it feels wrong. She's my mom. Brenda. Oh, will you grow a spine? It's not wrong, it's practical. She's sitting on over $1 million in assets that are just going to be eaten up by end-of-life care and inheritance taxes. This way we secure our family's future. We're doing what's best for our kids, for their college funds. She's had her life. It's our turn now. Just stick to the plan. I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Their lawyer had his eyes closed as if in pain. Robbie was staring at his hands, his whole body trembling. And Brenda was looking at me with an expression of pure murderous hatred. The mask was completely gone. The game was over. And all of her ugly, greedy plotting was laid bare for the world to see, captured forever in her own arrogant words. The sound of their own voices, dripping with conspiracy and contempt, hung in the air like a toxic fog. For a full 30 seconds nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The recordings had been a metaphorical bomb, and we were all sitting in the deafening silence of the aftermath. Their lawyer was the first to break. He slowly packed his briefcase, his movements stiff and precise. He didn't look at his clients. "My services for you are concluded," he said to the air in front of him. "I suggest you find new counsel, someone who specializes in criminal defense." He stood up, gave a curt, professional nod to Mr. Henderson, and walked out of the room without a backward glance. He was abandoning a sinking ship, and he was smart enough to get to the lifeboats first. His departure broke the spell. Robbie lifted his head from his hands, his face a mess of tears and snot. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his wife, and the love and deference he usually showed her were gone, replaced by a raw, wounded fury. "You," he choked out, the word thick with accusation. "This was you. All of it. Your plan. Your words. It's our turn now, Bren? She's had her life?" He mimicked her voice, his own laced with disgust. "That's my mother you were talking about. My mother." Brenda, who had been frozen in shock, snapped to life. All her fear and panic coalesced into a pinpoint of pure, unadulterated rage, and she aimed it all at the weakest target, her husband. "Oh, don't you dare!" she screeched, pointing a trembling finger at him. "Don't you dare try to play the innocent victim now, you pathetic mama's boy. You were right there with me every step of the way. Who was it that whined about wanting a bigger house? Who was it that complained that his promotion at the bakery was a dead-end job? You wanted this just as badly as I did. You just didn't have the guts to do it yourself. I didn't want this," Robbie yelled back, sweeping a hand around the room. "I didn't want to defraud my own mother. I thought we were just securing things. Protecting her." "Protecting her? You really are that stupid, aren't you?" Brenda laughed, a horrifying, joyless sound. "We were taking what was ours. What you were owed. That old woman has been controlling you with her money your entire life. I was trying to free you. And me." It was like watching a dam break. Years of their private resentments, their secret frustrations, their shared poisonous greed came pouring out. He accused her of being a manipulative gold digger. She accused him of being a weak, spineless child who could never escape his mother's shadow. They threw everything at each other. Past arguments, financial secrets, insults about each other's families. It was the complete and total implosion of their marriage, happening right there in front of me. I felt a strange, detached pity. They weren't just losing a potential fortune. They were losing everything, because their foundation had been built on nothing but greed. Mr. Henderson let them exhaust themselves. When their shouting finally subsided into ragged, angry breaths, he calmly picked up the old incorporation document one last time. "If the final act of this tragedy is concluded," he said, his voice cutting through the tense silence, "there is one final piece of business." He looked directly at Robbie, his expression not unkind, but firm as granite. "Robert, as you have just so vehemently stated, you are an employee of the Sweet Life Bakery. As such, you have a fiduciary duty to act in the company's best interest, and by extension, in the best interest of its sole owner, your mother." He flipped to the last page. Article 5. The Fiduciary Duty and Conduct Clause. "I'm afraid it's rather explicit. It states," he read directly from the page, "any heir, beneficiary, or employee of the corporation found to have engaged in willful misconduct, conspiracy, fraud, or any action deliberately intended to cause financial or personal harm to a founding partner shall be subject to immediate." He paused for effect. "An irrevocable disinheritance from all assets, properties, profits, and trusts related to the aforementioned corporation." He placed the document down gently. "The power of attorney you had your mother sign, the recorded conversations detailing your conspiracy, and your own admissions here today are more than enough to trigger this clause. The moment you decided to defraud your mother, Robert, you legally and irrevocably signed away your own inheritance. Every last cent." The finality of his words was absolute. Robbie just stared at him, his mouth agape, comprehension dawning in his tear-filled eyes. He hadn't just lost the battle. The rulebook, written by his own father 20 years ago, had just kicked him out of the game entirely. The weeks that followed the meeting were a blur of legal necessities and profound, deafening silence. "As I had decided, I did not pursue criminal charges. The public humiliation and financial ruin they had brought upon themselves felt like a more fitting punishment. My final act of maternal mercy was to let my son face the consequences of his own character, rather than those of the state. But mercy had its limits. The first official act was their termination. Mr. Henderson drafted the letters, citing gross misconduct and fraudulent activities, and had them delivered by a stone-faced courier. Their salaries, their health insurance, their connection to the bakery, all of it was severed with the clean slice of a legal document. The company car Brenda had been so proud of, a gleaming new SUV, was gone from their driveway the next morning. I had the locks on my house and the bakery changed that same day. My life, which they had so thoroughly infiltrated, was now a fortress once more. Their world, built on my money and their own arrogance, crumbled faster than I could have imagined. Without their inflated salaries, the mortgage on their oversized house was an impossible burden. I saw the for sale sign go up a month later, soon replaced by a grim foreclosure notice. They lost the house and most of the equity they had in it. I heard through the relentless small-town grapevine that they moved into a dingy, cramped apartment complex by the highway. Robbie, a man who had never done a day of hard labor in his life, was forced to take a job at a warehouse on the night shift. A friend who saw him at the grocery store said he looked like a ghost, thin, haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. The weight of his choices was physically crushing him. Brenda, true to her nature, had no tolerance for a life without luxury. Her marriage to Robbie had been a business transaction, and he was now a bankrupt asset. The shouting matches, apparently, were legendary in their new apartment building. 6 months after they lost everything, she was gone. She filed for divorce, fought viciously for full custody of their 2 children, and moved back to her home state to live with her parents. She left Robbie with nothing but a mountain of debt and a court order for child support he had no hope of paying. He tried to contact me, of course. At first it was angry, blaming text messages. Then, as his desperation grew, they became pleading voicemails left in the middle of the night. Long, rambling monologues filled with tears, excuses, and pathetic apologies. "I'm so sorry, Mom. It was all Brenda's idea. I never wanted to hurt you. I just don't know how I'm going to make it. I saved them all, but I never replied. How could I? The bridge between us wasn't just burned. It had been obliterated. The son I loved had died in that lawyer's office, replaced by a stranger I pitied, but could no longer trust. The final, painful chapter of the saga was the search for Frank's medal. That was a quest I had to undertake myself. It felt like a sacred duty. I spent days calling every pawn shop, every coin dealer, every military memorabilia collector within a 100-mile radius. I finally found it in a dusty little shop in a rundown strip mall. The owner, a gruff man with a kind face, listened to my story. He remembered the woman who sold it. "Yeah, she seemed hard," he said. "In a hurry. Didn't even haggle." He checked his records. Brenda had sold my husband's Purple Heart, a symbol of his sacrifice and bravery, for $50. She had traded his honor for gas money. I paid the man whatever he asked to get it back. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time, holding the cool, heavy metal in the palm of my hand. The simple ribbon, the profile of George Washington, a piece of my husband. I held it to my cheek, and I finally allowed myself to weep. I wept for the man I missed every day. I wept for the son I had lost. And I wept for the woman I had become. A survivor, yes, but one who would forever carry the scars of this terrible, needless war. After the storm there is the quiet. And in that quiet you have to choose whether to rebuild or to simply sit in the rubble. For the first month, I sat in the rubble. My house was secure, my finances were safe, but my heart felt like a hollowed-out ruin. The silence that had once been peaceful now felt like a crushing weight. Every corner of the house held a memory of Robbie as a child, a ghost of a life that was gone forever. The bakery, too, felt different. It was my sanctuary, but now it was also the scene of the crime, the prize they had fought to steal. I found myself going through the motions, my passion for the work replaced by a weary sense of duty. One afternoon, my young assistant manager, Maria, found me just staring at a rack of cooling bread, my eyes unfocused. "Mrs. Peterson, are you all right?" she asked, her young face etched with genuine concern. Maria had started with me as a teenager, bagging cookies after school. Now she was a bright, ambitious young woman with a culinary degree and a fire for the business that reminded me so much of myself at her age. In that moment, I made a decision. I could let this bitterness consume me and the bakery I loved, or I could use my power not just to protect, but to create. "Maria," I said, turning to her, "how would you like a promotion?" The next week, I had Mr. Henderson draw up the paperwork. I promoted Maria to general manager of the Sweet Life Bakery. I gave her a significant raise, full health benefits, and a generous profit-sharing plan. I was giving her more than a job. I was giving her a stake in the dream. I was passing the torch. The change was instantaneous. Her energy and creativity breathed new life into the old place. She launched a website for online orders. She started a series of popular cake decorating classes for kids. She partnered with local farms for fresh ingredients. The bakery didn't just survive. It began to soar. I stepped back into a new role, that of a mentor and owner. I would come in a few times a week to consult on recipes and chat with the old-timers, but the daily pressure was gone. I was no longer a servant to Frank's legacy. I was its proud custodian. And with that freedom, I began to rediscover the woman I was outside of being a wife and a mother. I took the trip to Alaska Frank and I had always dreamed of. I stood on the deck of a small ship, watching bald eagles soar over pristine forests, and felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I felt Frank's presence there, not as a memory of loss, but as a joyful spirit, urging me on. When I returned, I saw a flyer at the library for a watercolor painting class. On a whim I signed up. I was clumsy at first, my flowers looking more like colorful smudges. But I loved it. I loved the feel of the brush in my hand, the magic of watching colors bleed together on wet paper. I was creating something new, something that was just for me. My life began to fill with new things. The friends I made in my art class. The books I finally had time to read. The long walks I took in the morning, just to watch the sunrise. I had fought so hard to keep my house, and now I was finally learning to live in it again. I realized that the ultimate victory wasn't what happened in that lawyer's office. The true victory was this. It was waking up in the morning and feeling not dread, but possibility. It was learning that a life can be broken, but it can also be remade, stronger and more beautiful in the broken places. I had lost a son, but I had, in the most unexpected and painful way, found myself. So now here I am. I'm sitting in my garden, the one I've finally had time to tend to properly. The roses have never been more beautiful. There's a half-finished painting on an easel nearby, and the silence is filled with the buzz of happy bees. It's a good life. This whole terrible journey taught me some hard-won truths. The most important one is this. Age is not a weakness. It is not a disease. It is not a reason to be dismissed. Society, and sometimes even our own families, can try to tell us that as we get older, we become less than what we were. They see gray hair and wrinkles and assume the mind inside is fading too. My son and his wife made that fatal mistake. They looked at me and saw an obstacle, a relic from a bygone era whose only remaining purpose was to fund their future. They never bothered to look deeper. They never saw the lifetime of experience, the resilience forged in hardship, the quiet wisdom that comes from surviving all that life can throw at you. Our age is our armor. Our memories are our library. Our intuition is a muscle strengthened over decades of use. Do not ever let anyone convince you that you are fading. You are not fading. You are concentrating. To every child, every son and daughter listening to this, I beg you, do not look at your parents as a means to an end. Their love is not your entitlement. Their trust is not your personal bank account. The greatest inheritance they can ever give you has nothing to do with money or property. It is the legacy of a family built on a foundation of mutual respect, of honor, of simple, unconditional love. Greed is a poison, and it will rot everything it touches, including your own soul. Don't make the same mistake my son did. And finally, to my peers, to the women and men who have felt the sting of being underestimated, of being condescended to, of being made to feel invisible in a world that worships youth. Your story is not over. Your voice has power. Your life is your own. Guard it fiercely. Trust that little voice inside you that warns you when something is wrong. And never ever be afraid to fight for the respect you have earned and the life you have built. Thank you so much for letting me share my story with you. It's a heavy story, but I believe it's an important one. If any part of it touched you, or if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when the world expected you to sit down, please share your own experience in the comments below. Let's create a space where our wisdom is celebrated, not dismissed. Thank you again for listening. Please consider giving this video a like if it meant something to you, and subscribe for more stories. Remember, you are stronger than you know.